coordinator here at Mikasa. Thank you so much for joining us for our, we should count them, 6th webinar, 7th webinar. I had the privilege of attending the Maine Military and Community Network Conference this fall for the first time, and it was all about connecting military folks with local resources and how to build a network of local resources. And there just seemed like a lot of opportunities for partnership and for learning more, and one of the things I went away from was wanting to hear more from Adria Horn, the director of the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services, who talked about the Ruth Moore Act and benefits for victims of military sexual trauma. And I felt like I knew very little about that, and I wanted to know more. And so here we are. So a reminder to use the chat box. It's more exciting for everyone if it's an engaging conversation, if you get your questions answered. So please feel free to use the chat box whenever you have questions. Also a reminder to mute your phones and to introduce yourselves. But we're going to get started. We've switched the webinar times. That was an hour and a half before, and now it's an hour, because webinar content is best done in under an hour, I think. So we are here until 4-ish. So, so here we go. Let's see. So our guests today, thank you so much for being here in our office at Mikasa in Augusta, are Adria Horn, the director of Maine Bureau of Veteran Services, and Morris Lazat, the claim supervisor for the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit more and get started.
Hi everyone, I'm Adria. I really appreciate you inviting us and giving us the opportunity to do this. It's really exciting to be able to at least talk about what we do and be able to talk to other people who may have interactions with veterans that we have overlooked or we haven't had an opportunity to connect with, and we really appreciate everything that you do for veterans in Maine. So my name is Adria. I'm the director, and I've been here for about 18 months in this position. Previously, I worked for Senator Susan Collins in her Portland office as a caseworker doing military and veterans constituent service work. I was in the Army. I'm still in the Army. I'm in the reserves. I was on active duty for 11 years. I graduated from West Point and commissioned into the Military Police Corps, and then changed branches into psychological operations, which is in Army Special Operations, and I have been deployed 5 times since 9/11 happened. So I feel pretty confident in sort of understanding what veterans go through and sort of the transition services that they need. It's been a real honor to be here and serve veterans in Maine, and to work with Morris Lazat, who is right next to me, because he won't say this about himself, but we have really a super resource here in Maine. He is probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the entire state when it comes to veterans benefits, and he does not work for the VA like me. I don't work for the VA. We submit claims to the VA for veterans. But he has done this for so long that he is really just a go-to person when it comes to anything about VA claims. And I will let him continue his introduction.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, everyone. My name is Morris Lazat. I'm the claims supervisor for Maine Veteran Services. I've been an employee of Maine Veteran Services for 31 years. I've worked in every capacity in the Bureau except the directors, which I will pass on. The directors pretty much explained who I am, and that I am the technical advisor. I'm also the senior veteran service officer for the state of Maine. My office is at Togus, Maine. We provide quality review on all claims that are submitted to the VA. So unlike a lot of agencies that you may have dealt with in the past who mainstream claims directly to the VA, for us, our folks feed claims into us. They are reviewed for completeness and accuracy, and only after they pass a straight face test, mine, are they submitted into the VA as a complete claim. And we feel that by doing that, we enhance the success of our clients, which is very important. We want our clients to win. And the claims seem to go through the system very much, quite a bit quicker, because they are perfected and they are what the VA wants to see.
So we're going to go to the next slide. And this is twofold. So I wanted to give you first basically an overview, a very quick overview about what the Bureau provides as a state agency, and then we'll talk about basically like the claims process of submitting things to the VA. Please do not hesitate to ask questions or type them in the box at any given time. Like Katie had said, we want this to be as interactive as possible, and we really want to be able to answer specific questions that you have, so you don't, walk away feeling like you didn't get your question answered on some of these really technical topics. So this is basically the Bureau mission. We serve as the primary public advocate for Maine veterans. We assist them with their claims, and this is dependents as well as veterans. We oversee the memorial cemetery system. We have no national cemeteries in Maine, and so we have 4 state veteran cemeteries, and we recognize the service and sacrifice of Maine veterans through our recognition program. This is a little bit of an eye chart. You will hopefully get this later and so look at it. This is just a snapshot for you to see what we have in Maine for veterans. We have the 3rd largest population per capita in the United States of veterans. Between 130 and 140,000 we estimate with retirees, and a real significant portion of our veteran population is 55 and older. And this just gives you an idea of what we have in our state. So there's a wartime breakout, and then age demographic, and by gender.
Does this gender demographic reflect nationally, or because it's older veterans, are there fewer female?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. So this is some of the state benefits that we offer. Well, Morris is talking about representation. We represent veterans to the VA. So we take power of attorney for a veteran who wants to submit a disability claim to the VA. And that is a free service. Service organizations, veteran service organizations do that. The American Legion, the DAV, VFW, they have national service officers here in Maine. But there's usually 1 or 2 of them per organization, and we have 7 offices throughout the state. Again, the cemetery system, we have copies. We have a repository of DD-214s, which are the military discharge documents. This is like the most important document of your entire military career, and it's really a value that we have a copy. So if ever you're working with a veteran who needs that, please check with our office first, because if we don't have it, and you have to do a request to the National Personnel Records Center, it can take 30, 90 days. I mean, it can take quite a while. So please check with us first, because it usually takes us 5 minutes. We run the Veteran Dependent Educational Benefit, VDEB, which means in the state of Maine, if you are a dependent of a 100% permanent and totally disabled veteran, the VA has determined somebody 100% permanent and total. That dependent, a spouse, child, stepchild, adopted child, is allowed to have free tuition at any University of Maine system school. That's Community College, Maine Maritime Academy, and the University of Maine system. We manage the free lifetime day use park passes, recreational licenses like fishing and hunting, special license plates. We see veteran plates all over. The Bureau of Vehicles checks with us to verify veteran status. We run the Disabled Veteran Controlled Moose Hunt, which is a controlled moose hunt. It's the only one in the country that's just for disabled veterans. Can help people understand all the tax exemptions for veterans. And then we are a partner of the Maine Veterans Homes, which is the assisted living facility. There are 6 in the state that are just for veterans and their dependents. So a lot of information is not what you know, but who you know. This is a list of all of our service offices and our service officers throughout the state. So if in your area, we also have itinerant offices. So all of these service officers hold itinerant office hours, and those are available at our website, maine.gov/veterans. This is just knowing who you're going to talk to if you need to talk to a service officer. These are our cemetery locations. A little bit about the cemetery system. Our cemeteries are just spectacular. If you've been to a veteran cemetery, they are just really, they're wonderful. They are really, truly a respectful, quiet, solemn place. And because we have no national cemeteries burying in Maine, our state cemeteries really fill that void, and we partner with them. So any veteran who's eligible for the same burial benefits through the VA would get them and be entitled to be buried in our cemeteries. This is a list of the Maine Veterans Homes. This is just for your knowledge. Maine Veterans Homes are typically, if you have seniors or rehabilitation, long-term care for the veteran and their dependent is eligible to go here. It's these are, I just want to brag a little bit. I don't run them. I just want to brag a little bit. We have the best veterans nursing homes and arguably the best nursing homes in the entire country. Maine Veterans Homes has won the Quality Care Awards from the American Healthcare Association more times than I think any other healthcare long-term assisted living facility in the entire country. I mean, it's like amazing how wonderful they are. We have a legislatively approved recognition program where we provide honorable service certificates for veterans of wartime periods and certificates here for Korea, World War II, Vietnam. And this is just an example of what it would look like. We do these ceremonies all over. We do them for, living veterans. We do them for people if they are recognizing somebody who's passed at hospice place. These are plaques and coins. We have coins that are made that look exactly like the plaques, and these plaques are in the hollow flags, and the coins go with the certificates. And this is the women veterans plaque, and we give this as a coin as well that matches, which is really special. Service medals for Gold Star families and those injured in service, in combat really. A link to our website. We've been very busy this year. This is just internal stuff, but our link to our website is really there, and wanted to show you this if you've never been to it before. Maine.gov/veterans. Now we have a resources tab. It's the first one in the country where we were able to geographically map every single service that is offered to veterans, an organization or service that is offered to veterans in the entire state of Maine. We started with a pretty small list and soon got to just about 400.
Wow.
So you can check on any number of these 16 categories, and what you can't see down here, you can also do it by county. So you can do category and by county to see what's around you. And this is, I think, an older one, but there's a table format too if you want to print out an actual Excel spreadsheet with a table on it. So this is really important because we have a lot of seniors who are veterans who are getting services elsewhere. So we want other people to know how to access the resources if you're the point of entry for a veteran looking for assistance in your area. And then we have a calendar of events, all events. Anybody can put anything. It's a community calendar. Please, if you have events that are veteran related or you want to expand the invitation to other veterans, please use our calendar or check our calendar. It's going to take a while for people to use it consistently, but we are certainly getting there, and we wanted everyone to know what is available in Maine. So now I'm going to turn this over to Morris. Happy to answer any questions about that stuff previously, but we're going to talk a lot more about the actual MST, military sexual trauma, the VA claims process, and perhaps some things you do or don't know about what it means to submit a claim for MST in the VA system.
All right, thank you. We'll go through a bunch of slides real quick, and then we'll focus our attention on the actual claims process itself and how a claim goes through the system through the eye of Maine Veterans Services. So we'll look at it from our perspective. So military sexual trauma. Many veterans, male and female, have experienced military sexual trauma while serving in the military in civilian capacities. And the Department of Veterans Affairs, or the VA, calls these traumas military sexual traumas. The VA defines MST as sexual assault, including rape or repetitive and threatening sexual harassment. If veterans experience MST, they may be affected by their experience from the time the experience occurred to many years later, and they develop a multitude of problems, from psychological to physical problems. All too often, men and women in the service who have reported sexual assault by another service member have seen reprisals. They end up being put out of the military with either uncharacterized discharge or with personality disorders. And a personality disorder is basically a kiss of death. It is considered a congenital developmental abnormality and not a rateable condition.
Like it was there before.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Should we go to the next slide? Generally, service-connected connection can be established for a disability resulting from disease or injury. That's a fundamental premise of VA. It is a monetary payment by the VA for a disability that the VA recognizes as having occurred while you're on active duty, and there are many definitions of active duty. So
I just want to, just on layman's terms, it's really like workers' compensation. It doesn't mean you got shot while you were in combat.
absolutely.
I twisted my ankle while I was walking to the motor pool. I mean, it's really that simple.
A lot of veterans feel that if they were not actively engaged in combat or participating in combat type activities, that they are not truly veterans, or they're not entitled, or they're less entitled to their counterparts. As I indicated when we started, I've been doing this for 31 years. When I first started, the VA system was split into two houses. They would, if you were directly involved in the duties, there was one level of payment, and if it was not, it was a totally different level, a much less payment. And they combined the two now, and as the director pointed out, that it could be something as simple as I sprained my ankle and it never resolved, or it could be as complicated as military sexual trauma. So, a veteran who experienced a military sexual trauma can successfully navigate the VA system if they had an incident in military trauma while on active duty, they have a current diagnosis, and there is a nexus. Now, a nexus is an important element of this whole thing. And what does a nexus mean? It's a tie that binds. So it's one thing for someone to say, I have been actively diagnosed with military sexual trauma, and the VA will say, well, okay, who did that? Are they licensed to do that? Is it within the scope of their license to provide that diagnosis? Because a lot of things happen to people, either pre-service, post-service, and in service, the VA then wants to know is, are we able to tie that diagnosis to the event in service? So in other words, they can look unilaterally or bilaterally. And so when they look at bilaterally, their focus will be on the adolescent period prior to entry. Then they'll look at the service, and they'll look at after the service. And we encounter a lot of folks who, because of the events in service, had a very difficult ride in life. They were just not dealt a very nice set of cards, and they struggle, which is not to say that they can't file a claim, just a little more complicated. It requires a different presentation to the VA, so the VA understands where this person is coming from. And we'll talk about that presentation a little bit more when we talk about comp and pen exams later on in the actual claim submission process. Next slide, please. Here's an important fact. You cannot receive compensation on the basis of military sexual trauma. Alone, right. So most typically when we talk about MST and we're talking about filing a claim, it is not for MST, it is for the predominant condition is post-traumatic stress disorder. It is for something like gastrointestinal, and it's not, the list goes ad infinitum. If you can have a diagnosis for it and link it nexus-wise to the event, it is a viable claim within the VA system, and they will look at it. So you must have a compensable health condition such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, substance abuse, and again the list goes on. Sometimes veterans develop PTSD more from the retaliation that occurs as a result of reporting it to a commanding officer. When you are embedded into a unit, you are taught from an early point in your military career that you don't make waves. And if you do, there is a price to pay. And this is what this is referring to. Could we go to the next slide, please? So the symptoms of MST can be psychological and physical, and there are many, and there are just too many to list here. Sexual assault survivors have a much higher rate of medical problems than average. Some of the problems we've listed here go from loss of libido to anxiety, erectile dysfunctions. They just cannot go out into public. They can't have, they just socially just not working, and then it impacts them occupationally. Other medical disorders are not necessarily sexual in order, include migraine headaches, gastrointestinal distress, and these are all things that we ask our clients to consider when they're talking to their doctor. When you do an intake assessment, you don't focus on just one thing. Very often, if a person was sitting in a room with me or outside, let's start that way, and they were listening to me talk to a client, they said, well, you're in there just wasting time. And to them, it is wasting time, and to me, it's a conversation. So I take them out and bring them back, and take them out and bring them back. And in the course of that, I'm making notes. I always begin by saying I'm not being impolite. I'm just making notes. I'm doing timelines. and something will pop up and I say, what are you talking about? Talk to me about that. And they say, well, that's not important. I say, well, this is important. Let's talk about that. So part of the process in dealing with folks who've gone through military sexual trauma is to spend a lot of time with the clients. It's not unusual to sit with them for 2 hours at a time. And I'm not talking about asking them to divulge, information that's causing them to relive the trauma. I'm just talking about what's going on with you now, mentally, physically. Who are you seeing? Why are you not seeing them? What's going on? What can we do to help you with all this stuff?
The VA, claim process itself is basically like a list of symptoms, and I think it can seem overwhelming to think that you almost have to dissect your event and think of all the different ways it could be affecting your life. And unfortunately, that is how the claims process works. So that's why, and Morris will get to this, we really stress that anyone who has MST really should be represented by a service organization, because you can't possibly dissect your own event and think of all the different things that have happened to you to submit a claim to the VA. It's so overwhelming to think that you would say, oh, that is my GI thing because I'm really stressed out, and it's just too much, and we just don't want other people to have to relive the event, to relive the event, to relive the event when they are putting themselves in a position where they wouldn't even know the information in the first place.
That's great. Next slide. So the assessment of PTSD, there are 4 objectives that we focus on when we're looking at PTSD. Examining the presence of a diagnosis. Diagnosis is absolutely critical at this point. Until the law changes, these are the rules we go by. Determining the severity of the PTSD symptom, that is realized during what's called a C&P, or comprehension examination, when that person is actually sitting with a medical doctor, psychiatrist, or PhD psychologist. MST is unique because in the VA healthcare system, if you filed a claim for any other condition, you could end up with a nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, or neurologist. When you file a claim for MST within the healthcare system, they must be licensed by the VA as MD psychiatrist or PhD psychologist. Establish a relationship between the exposure to military stressors and the current symptomatology. What we're referring to there is there's a VA form called 210781 alpha, which is it is a statement. It's nothing more than a piece of paper that guides you through the process of explaining to the VA what happened to you while you're in the military. And one of the things we'll talk about later is people often ask, well, how much detail do I put? Because that scares the EVGs out of people, and it should. And there's no clear-cut answer to that, but we'll come back to that one.
And for clarification, the diagnosis has to be with the...
The diagnosis must be from a medical doctor.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And
describe how the functions impair social and occupational function. The reason that's important is, as Adria indicated, the law is written, as most laws are written. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're talking about here is 4.130 of 38 CFR.
That's
and
the
it says,
Code of Federal Regulations.
Code of Federal Regulations. And it says that in order to diagnose PTSD, they go in elements of 10, and each one builds on the one before. And it always starts occupational functioning and social functioning, and then it goes further into anxiety, and it talks about all the other elements that are necessary to a claim. And so when you're putting a claim together, we don't want to limit it and say we're filing a claim for, say, PTSD to MST. We would say we're filing a claim for PTSD due to MST to include symptoms of, but not exclusive. And then we list as many symptoms as we can. So basically at this point we're taking a shotgun approach to this, because if we limit ourselves, then they will look at only the one thing that we've identified. If we throw it all out there, kind of like, I call it the spaghetti model, throw it to the wall and see what sticks, then the VA is obligated to step up and really try and help the client here. Could we go to the next slide, please?
This is a problem when you, again, I go back to the representation, and I'll use this as an example for myself. When I separated from service, I was filling out the form. I was at Fort Bragg in North Carolina with a VA representative in the office. I had just had a baby. I'm not paying attention. These are the 2 things that really bother me are, arthritis and something else, or I think I have hearing loss. And, right, so that's all they look at.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a lot more going on, but I didn't really know it. And because I didn't put anything else there, they didn't look at anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So this, as Morris said, the more you actually put that could be attributed, whether you know it's directly attributed or not, if it could be attributed, the VA is obligated to look into it,
Mm-hmm.
where they're not obligated to infer something could have happened to you any other way.
Mm-hmm.
They are not obligated to do that, and they won't.
Mm-hmm. We talk about that with protection from abuse orders, because it's a civil system, it's a civil process that you could walk in and do yourself, and perhaps successfully. However, if you don't have the perspective of the system it's going to be applied to, never mind if you're not in the place to sort of think about how one thing might be connected to another, or know the implications of if you don't include that one little piece. And so why we encourage people to work with advocates, and also when possible to work with attorneys. It's not because you couldn't do yourself, but
That's
of the
right.
things that might be missed. And it's actually a similar approach around protection orders, is you're going to put in all the things
Yeah.
and see what this particular system honors as a link,
Mhm.
honors as like reaching a certain bar when it comes to criminal code. But anyway, I just kind of thought it was an interesting parallel.
So here we're going to look at how claims, or MST claims in particular, are processed by the VA. When a claim is submitted to the VA, when we do it, we send it into what's called the Evidence Intake Center. So it comes to us, we vet the claim, we send it to the VA through the Evidence Intake Center. It's digitized and inserted into a veteran's e-benefits, or an electronic benefits claim, which VA calls VBMS. VA has gone totally digital in their claims processing. So once the claim is established within VBMS, and we are confident that it has to, when we take a claim, we control the claim. By controlling the claim, I mean we track the progress of the claim, not monthly, but we know the timetable through which VA evolves. So our first tracking would be to make sure that VA has correctly updated the claim form. It is complete, has submitted. It's been assigned what's called an end product code. For VA, what that means is it's a 3-digit code that follows the claim through the process, but more importantly, the codes that end in 7 are MST. Every disability has an end number, which is a digit that's an identifier. So once they establish that, then we just kind of let the claim process through. What we're looking for, the next evolution, is for the VA to pick it up. So when the VA picks up the claim, it is they track it by the zip code. So then it's routed, it's pushed forward to the regional office.
Mm-hmm.
The regional office then looks at the issues. They try and break it down into teams. The minute the claim's identified as an MST claim, it is pushed to Special Ops team. The Special Ops team has received special training within the VA to look for markers, because VA recognizes that most MST claims don't have clear-cut markers in the record. Most people who have MST did not step forward because they knew the ramifications.
There wasn't like an
duties.
event indicated in the...
Sometimes there is. We
Right.
get lucky.
Right.
I mean, lucky from the
Really nice.
perspective that we can help the client,
Yeah.
but not lucky.
Yeah.
So at the Spec
Okay.
Ops teams, what
Yep.
they're going to do is they're going to vet the claim. And here is where the 210781, the actual statement in support of the claim for military sexual trauma, comes to bear. And earlier we talked about how much do we put of ourselves into this document. And this is where you either did a good job or you did a poor job. Because here is a person who does not know you, is going to review the claim. If they feel there's enough evidence in this document, they will then do what's called a pull-in. They'll go out to the National Personal Record Center and they'll pull in every document that has your name on it, basically. Personnel records, medical records, clinical records. A clinical record is a hospitalization record. Anytime you sought or received treatment, any record that is identified, they will pull it in. Once it's pulled in, they'll look at the 0781 again, and they make a decision. Do we push it forward to the next level, which is to order an examination to see if you have a diagnosis and how severe your disability is. If it does not, the claim ends there.
But this is after someone has gone to you, to
Yeah.
a claim specialist.
To
So
our-
you
to
are
our
the one
office.
putting it into that
Yeah.
larger system.
Yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully we've not put a claim into the system that's not well developed.
Right. Okay.
So what we're talking about here is the process, and we have notes for DSM-5. This is the new criteria. Are your group familiar with DSM-5? DSM-5 is
I
called...
already went to the next slide, if you don't want to talk about it.
Okay, well, basically, it's the manual by which anybody that practices mental health psychology or
Right,
psychiatry, this is their guidebook for diagnosing. They
Right.
must follow this or it's not a valid diagnosis.
Gotcha.
So, on the next slide, we're talking about, and we have highlighted here that the VA understands it does not require service medical records containing proof. And that's very important.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the spec ops team. They're trained to look for details. That shows what happened. If you give them a 60-day window and you say, the event happened on or about this date, they're looking from that window forward to see what changed. Duty assignments, behaviors, patterns, anxieties, depressions, sick calls. This is what they're referring to here. And it's all based on the history as reported by the veteran in the statement in support of the MST claim. Can we move to the next one, Matt? Sure. And here we're talking about the various proofs or material that can be submitted. And quite often police records and pregnancy tests were not. More often than not, what we look for or we try and find out is who knows about this event, who did you talk to, friends, mom and dad, brothers, sisters, the people that most people would have enough confidence in to say, I need to talk to you, there's something happened to me. But this is a list of things that the VA potentially could look at if you were able to provide this. We encourage our folks to reach out through Facebook, any avenue possible to get this
So
done.
this is all part of that initial claim. That
This
you
is
do
all
with
part of the
someone who's
initial
that
claim.
information.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we move on? So what do we do now? As we indicated earlier, we feel that veterans need to be represented, and statistically we know this is important. Well over 50% of claims filed MST, if they're represented, do better at the regional office level, and 70% better at the Board of Veterans Appeals. The reason for that is the disparity is that at the regional offices, we often feel like their hands are tied. It's supposed to be a veteran-friendly system, and if it's more likely than not 50-50, they should rule in the veteran's favor. But if they do, and it comes under quality review, then that person has to step up and say, why did you make this decision? So there's a reluctance to give that 50-50, while at the board you're actually talking to a federal judge, and it's a non-adversarial system, and we are able to present our claim as logically as possible to the judge, and this person is empowered to make a decision. So we do very well at the Board of Veterans Appeals. So if there's any questions on...
I just wanted to talk about a couple of other things. In the Bureau, we are actually legislatively required to have someone who is considered an expert in MST and a female service officer. So even though the words say that in the statute, hiring is not matching that. We have had a very difficult time hiring for females. For some reason, we actually just aren't getting applications. We've hired 4 people in the past year itself. It's been very difficult for us to actually fill this position with a female service officer, and that's unfortunate because there are actually no female service officers in the state of Maine. We know that a lot of men experience MST. A lot of men experience MST, but the legislature made it specific that we needed to have a female service officer. So because, there's a question down there, so because we don't have that, we know that we have our service officers who are skilled in just submitting VA claims. And if you have someone, male or female, who would like to be just a female or isn't comfortable as a service officer, we will bend over backwards to find someone that they are comfortable working with. Because getting the information right and submitting it to the VA correctly is way more important than just hiring somebody who isn't right for the job to represent veterans. We recognize that this is an issue, but we will do whatever we can. We have had several women who have come forward and said, I didn't like this service officer, can I meet with somebody else? Or I don't feel comfortable not having a female there, can we have a female in the room? Yes, we will do that. The next statement says preparing for the comp and pen exam. Another frequently asked question at the bottom, those are sort of combined. Will I have to live through the event again? I think Morris touched on this, and he's going to go into more detail about this. And the answer is living through the event on the nitty-gritty details is not what the VA needs. They do not need to know that information. They need to know how this has affected your life thus forward and how it is really limiting your ability to function. That's what they need to know. So it's really important, I think, in conversations that if you're having them with these people, is to say, if your fear is that you're going to have to live through the event again, and that's preventing you from filing a claim with the VA, let's talk about how we can get past that, because that shouldn't be the reason that someone is actually avoiding submitting a claim for this, because there is a lot of help that comes and benefits that come from that. And then I would just ask for your help about, not that you all as an audience don't know this, but talking about people who know their own triggers and stressors. We have 7 offices throughout the state. Everybody has a different technique, and we have a lot of veterans, and everybody has a different trigger and a different stressor. And the environment itself may be great for Vietnam veterans, and it may be terrible for Iraqi veterans, but it's very difficult to make one environment right for everyone. And we are not social workers. We are service officers to do this. So our skill set is different, and we do know that some people are oftentimes not prepared mentally for going in to do this and talk to a service officer about it. We would just ask for some other assistance, and if you're ever able to accompany someone and that helps them, I think that would be an excellent suggestion, because we certainly don't want anyone to feel like the experience was too negative or wasn't, we just don't want anyone to walk away because that experience was something that we couldn't have avoided.
That's great. That was a question that I had actually, is whether or not an advocate would be able to accompany them while they're going through this process. And another question that I had as well is, I know that each case is going to look different, but do you have kind of an approximate time of how long this claims process generally takes from beginning to end?
I can tell you that today we're looking at in excess of 125 days. And the reason for that is, as many of you know, if you follow the news, there's a tremendous backlog at the VA. So VA is all about their backlog. So today, the VA mandate was to work no case that had a date after June 1st. They're trying to work cases prior to June 1st. If they had in their work queue insufficient work, then they could work a newer case. So we would have to say about 125 days. Now, that's a rough estimate. Now, if a veteran comes in that has PTSD, MST, just as an example, and these folks are experiencing issues with homelessness or near homelessness, then it changes the complexion of the claim dramatically, because they become a priority processing. And VA will process those claims in a matter of a day to 2-3 days if they can.
And the priority is around homelessness and stability.
Yes, absolutely.
Stability.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
We had a question.
So the question from Kristen in Bangor is, what happens when an older vet tries to start the process but VA can't find medical records?
The medical records, as we indicated in the slides, are VA has to go look for records, but they don't rest the case on the presence or absence of the records. So, as we indicate, buddy statements, how well you do your 0781, VA looks into facts and circumstances of your service, and they look at you. Let's say in the example here, they can't find the service record. So then they look at you, well, what happened? How soon after you left the service before you started seeing doctors? And what kind of complaints were they treating you for? if you are having marital issues, so what were the cause of those marital issues? Let's get some letters, let's get some information. So this is not the end of the road for these folks. It just means that we have to shift gears and turn our attention to focus more on what are the circumstantial evidence that we can get to make the claim better or more perfected for the VA.
And can you talk a little bit more about what the benefits are intended to address, and if they are varied, right? Like, is it intended to address, the fact that you can't work, or the fact that you need more treatment, or is it like what? And do some people get more benefits than the other? Like, what comes with benefits, I guess?
So for example, there are 22 million veterans in the country, and contrary to what most people believe, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, does not provide medical benefits for everybody. So if you were in the Army for 4 years, from 1984 to 1989, you didn't serve during a war period, you're not eligible. If you were not ever disabled and filed a disability claim to get a disability rating, you are not eligible for medical benefits. So there have to be certain things that are present to meet eligibility criteria to actually use the VA. Vet centers are like frontline counseling centers for combat veterans, and they've expanded their who they service outside of combat veterans. They now do grief counseling and MST. So if you are a veteran that doesn't have an MST claim or an MST actual disability rating from it, and you weren't in combat, you won't be allowed to go to the vet center. And the VA mental health is at the VA. So if you live in Skowhegan and can't get to the VA for this specifically, and you are waiting for this disability rating and can't use the vet center, then you've really limited what you're able to do in your own treatment that is free.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah.
I don't think I answered both of yours, though.
Nope, I was just asking whether or not an advocate would be able to accompany during this
So,
process, and also.
good question. So very often, when a veteran presents to VA to be evaluated, they will be accompanied by a social worker or a spouse. And the question arises, can I go in and be with this person? And the answer is yes and no. And the reason for that is, part of the VA's fear is if another person is sitting in the room, you're going to hold back because you don't want to present the story. Recently, we had an instance where a clinical social worker wanted to go with the veteran, and the doctor, her choice, said, yes, you can come in. Here are the rules. Sit on your hands. No hand gestures, no facial movements. You are not allowed to speak. You are here for support and support only.
And this is for the exam.
This
For the
is for the
exam.
exam and not
Exam
the
itself.
conversation with you.
That's
Right,
right.
right,
Okay.
yeah. And this is important because
So we allow this.
we allow this, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
You know, if you want to bring anybody you want to because it just enhances your level of comfort and will help us help you, then absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the VA
The
Yeah,
VA,
has different rules.
right.
And we find too, I mean, part of the training that advocates receive is how to be a support and a presence in a law enforcement interview and through a forensic medical exam. And that training is basically, don't breathe if you can.
Don't make yourself part of the
because,
investigation.
I mean, that's evidence and it's an investigative process, which theirs is too, and so I can imagine why any person without training but knowing they could at least start by coming to a meeting with you or with a claims specialist would be great to know.
So let's talk about this preparing for the CMP exam. So recently we had some folks who did not quite understand that. So part of our process is when we take a claim is we take the power of attorney, we represent, we're very much in control of the claim, and we tell our client, so here's what we've done so far. And we ask them to review all the documents for completeness and accuracy. We tell them the purpose of all the documents. We're good. Okay, so now we're going to put this claim to the VA system. Expect a letter. when you get a letter that says you are to report to VA for examination, what they call a comp and pen exam, we tell them, don't do this on your own. You need to talk to us first. And a lot of people say, well, why should I talk to them? You know, I'm going to the vet centers. It's not the same dialogue that we're having at all. So when a claim goes into the system and it is vetted through the system, the VA, the VSR that sees the 0781, the statement in support of claim, and sees all the evidence, actually writes a letter to the Chief of Staff's office ordering that an exam be conducted on this veteran for the following things. And the veteran's identified the following events, and here are the markers, and we flagged all of the records for the doctor to review. We find this is very important because sometimes there's a disconnect between what the veteran thinks they're going to be evaluated for and what the VA is actually going to evaluate you for. So part of why we want you to come and talk to us is that, one, I want to get your brain in test mode. And that's important because I want if your brain is not thinking about questions, you get a surprise question, you shoot from the hip, you give an answer, then you walk away and say, oh snap, why did I say that? I should have said something. So that's part of my goal, is to get you thinking about the possibilities. When I'm doing the preparation for C&P, we don't actually dissect the 0781. That's between the veteran and the doctor. What we focus on is, let's talk about your adolescence, the kind of questions that the VA could ask you independent of what's on the actual statement you gave to the VA. So that, one, you understand, obviously this was a concern, you filed the claim, and you're here, and your question is, what does the VA want to know from me? I'm serious, like what this person said is, how can I make this claim go through, and what do they want to know? Because I want to tell them clearly and concisely. That's my job. And so I think that people don't understand why I need preparation for a C&P exam. And sitting with the client, actually looking at what was ordered, how it was ordered, and the language that the VA used is absolutely critical to not walk into a minefield. So going in, you sit, we talk, I hear what you say, I repeat what you say. The VA won't do this. So at a C&P exam, so that you understand, is the questions come out of DSM-5. And they're all on the computer. So the physician will say, question 1, look at the person, question, when they think you're done talking, the answers are there as well. That's the problem. If you didn't answer the question completely, or you use words like sometimes, a couple, and a few, it means a lot to you, it means nothing to me. Sometimes the word that the person is very comfortable using to describe means a lot to them, but in a rating examination where they're trying to quantify your level of disability, it means nothing. So part of this preparation is, I said, this is what I heard you saying. Is that what you want to say? And I said, no. Okay. Then what is it you want to say? This is what they're hearing. So we go through this whole process, and sometimes as a result of sitting with me, quite often as a result of sitting with me, unintentionally, we stress you out. And for me, that's good.
Right.
And why do I mean that's good? Because VA should be looking at you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after you come back and you can't stand to have anybody else around you. You are depressed, you're anxious, you're moody, you're irritable. All of those adjectives are there. If you present from, well, sometimes it's like this and sometimes it's like that, then that's a bad. Our job is not to game the VA, but our job is to help our clients understand the process, what they go through, and what they must communicate to the examiner in order for them to be rated fairly. So typically, an examination is scheduled or slotted for an hour, but it's not actually an hour, it's 15 to 20 minutes. Within that hour, the physician must review all of the records that were sent up and conduct the evaluation and type the notes. So in 15 minutes, you must present your case very well.
And that's it.
And that's it.
It's that one wrinkle in time that could determine, right, whether or not somebody thinks you're telling the truth.
Right.
And that's why this is important.
Yeah.
So you can see how this changes the complexion of everything. So,
Yeah.
And again, once the evaluation is complete, the veteran can come back and talk to us about how they felt the process went, or they can just go home.
Yeah.
Most of them just want to go home. They want to get out of there. They're
Yeah.
exhausted. It's kind of like being in a fight with Mike Tyson, except you still got both ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually in a matter of a few days, because we have power of attorney, we can see the outcome of the evaluation.
Okay. I can just imagine how often, I just think if there's so many circumstances where or victims of sexual violence need to gear up to have their self put together to figure out how to and it's a skill, right? And this is a situation where you're asking them not to do that, right? Because you have to gear, whether if you've made a police report, if you get a protection order, if you continue to have to work with someone who's sexually assaulted you, you can keep it together for a small amount of time, and that's what we sort of are trained to do around people of authority, and I can imagine that that's part of the issue too, right? That people want to present well, but we don't.
Quite often
That's
when
not
I'm doing the
helpful
interview,
when you're
I'll see
trying to
people.
talk about the impact
That's right.
of this.
I'll see people, I call it braced up. They're either sitting on their hands or they get their arms crossed, and I can see just by the line of questioning that I'm asking them, they're becoming very agitated. And I'll say, so what's going on right now? So, say like, what? And I'll say, so your heart is beating out of your chest, you feel like your shirt is moving, and your brain's saying, run, fool, run. And they're saying, right. I said, but you haven't told me that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She said, was that important? I said, absolutely it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Katie had said I mentioned the Ruth Moore Act, and at the conference, Ruth Moore is here in Maine. A lot of people already know who she is, and runs a organization called Internity, and really it's sort of a national organization, and talks to different people about MST claims and what recommendations she has, but she really is national and is not considered like a state organization exclusively. But the Ruth Moore Act that Congresswoman Shelley Pingree had put in, the goal was to change the requirements for the disability claim, where a victim of MST could simply just write a letter, and that the statement in support of the claim claiming the MST occurred would be sufficient, and that secondary markers would not be required anymore. Because there are several presumptive conditions that that Vietnam veterans, for example, have a list of things that are presumptive conditions based on Agent Orange exposure. So if you have diabetes and you set foot on Vietnam soil for one day, whether or not you weigh 450 pounds and have a terrible lifestyle, if you have diabetes, the presumptive condition is that you have diabetes because of your Agent Orange exposure. And the VA will automatically give you a disability rating for that, for diabetes. It is not the same for MST. And that was what one of the real big pushes of this legislation was supposed to do, which is a real huge leap for the VA to take, because just taking somebody's word for it and giving out money based on it is not something they've been comfortable doing. But what has happened as a result, because the legislation has been approved by the House twice but not approved by the Senate, it is not an actual law, but what has happened as a result is that, I will use our VA as an example, has taken a very liberal approach to processing MST claims. So though the legislation itself has not made this a presumptive condition across the country that everyone does, we know that here in Maine, our VA, being so close to the submission of the legislation and having our own resident be a part of it, really has done quite an excellent job of really looking at claims liberally and not applying super tough scrutiny that does occur across the country in other VAs. So that is another reason why we really, really want people to be represented, so that we can use our contacts, our networks, and our relationship with the VA to help them as much as possible.
And we think at MICASA in terms of policy and legislation is that you also need examples of impacts of legislation in order to move forward. So if people are filing claims and not getting them, and you don't know that,
Right.
then you can't then advocate for
That's right.
changes. And so we do the same. We ask people if there's an impact of, we've been talking recently about vacatur of records of victims of sex trafficking and exploitation. If they have a record, criminal record, as a result of their trafficking, can it get vacated or expunged? But in order to do that, you need to find people who are their lives are being impacted negatively, their safety and stability is being impacted by this record. And so similarly, I imagine the more you work with people who have experienced military sexual trauma, even if they don't get benefits, as examples for what other advocacy needs to happen,
That's right.
would be really valuable. So, great. Are there other questions? Do folks have things that they need to clarify or feedback?
Happy to leave both my email address and Morris's email address if Katie wants to type them in. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to send questions directly to either one of us, whether it's a general question, anecdotal, or specific about somebody that you would like to get some assistance for, we'll do that. So mine is Adria, ADRIA, .horn @maine.gov. And Morris?
Mine is Morris, MAURICE, Lizotte, LIZOTTE, @va.gov.
So that's tricky because he works physically at the VA, but he's a state of Maine employee. We have 4 people who work there and have va.gov email addresses.
Any other questions?
We hope this has been helpful for you and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this issue.
Thank
And
you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your time and your expertise, and we will certainly send people your way. And as a reminder, this will be recorded. Also as a reminder, you will have your local military and community network groups that you can be reaching out to, and you can also reach out to us or Adria about how to do outreach in your area, how to connect with these officers in your area. So please keep us in mind, follow up with us if you have questions, and thank you all so much.